Hi, my name is Layton. I'm an intuitive and a mystic, and I asked you guys, what is something you have always wanted to know about entities, attachments, entity removal, or exorcism? I asked on Twitter, I asked on Facebook, and I asked on Instagram, and I got some really great questions back. I said this in part one of this video, but this is genuinely one of my favorite topics. I love talking about this. And something that I notice when I'm talking to people about this kind of work, especially when I start talking about exorcisms and whatnot, there's a lot of fear around it. And I totally get it. A lot of people feel afraid about this kind of topic. They feel anxious or stressed out, even talking about it. And talking about it, I want to be clear, does not necessarily attract it. It is our fear that attracts it. So when we are talking about it from a place that is very grounded and realistic, then it's okay, and we can talk about this stuff and talk about it in a way where we know how to approach it from the heart, and we know how to tackle these things head on. And it doesn't have to be this scary, mysterious thing that we don't know how to handle. I also want to be clear that entity attachments, everything I'm talking about, is not necessarily the same thing as something like demonic possession. Demonic possession does happen. It is actually a lot more rare. The average person really doesn't have to worry about being like fully possessed or something like that. It definitely does happen, but it's rare. It's more common when we are out of the body, when we have devolved the spirit or detached ourselves from the body to an extent where our body then becomes inhabitable by something else. So when something just attaches to us, it's not replacing our spirit. It's not taking over our body by any means. But if we are experiencing possession, then that's a super different thing. So I'm not talking about straight up possession. If you want me to talk about straight up possession, I definitely can do that. I will for sure be touching on it a little bit in this video, but not going like super in depth, just because since it's not something that was asked about directly, and since it's not something that the average person has to deal with, the entire reason why I asked this question and why I wanted to see what questions you guys had about entities and attachments and entity removal and exorcism is because I wanted it to be something that was less scary. I wanted it to be something that you could look at objectively and look at through the lens of spiritual science rather than through the lens of fear, and learn how to approach from a grounded place, from a neutral place, and having less of that like Hollywood type stuff in there, and less of that religious programming and that fear dogma that is really common for us to kind of carry throughout life, and when we or throughout our lives. And when we have all of this fear, when we have all of this anxiety regarding these subjects, we end up not avoiding, and we're not, somehow evading entity attachment. We aren't somehow avoiding this kind of experience. Instead, we end up bypassing whatever wounds are making us susceptible to entity attachments. We end up bypassing whatever traumas are leaving us open for whatever to attach to us. So we think that we are just avoiding it entirely, and that's not true. It's not possible. So we got to talk about it, and we can do so in a way that's not scary. So I'm just going to jump right in and see what questions I have here. Okay. How can you tell what kinds of entities you're dealing with? Or how can you distinguish between spirit guide, ancestor, angel, demon, deceased person, etc.? This is a really, really important question. I think it's something where everyone kind of has to go through this Well, every psychic, every practicing psychic, has to go through a period of testing where you learn discernment, because it's not really the kind of thing that you can necessarily explain if you have not experienced it before. It's kind of like if someone has never experienced the sun before, how do you explain it to them? You could maybe say that it's warm, or that it looks yellowish when you look at it, or sometimes it looks white. You could say that it burns your eyes, and they can try and piece together based on these hints what it might be like to experience it, but it's not going to be the same thing as if they had actually experienced it. When a child is, a baby's born, and they don't have these experiences until they experience them because they're children. So when you see a child and they've never seen a hot stove before, what happens? You can tell them all day long that it's hot and not to touch it. They don't know what that means until they do it. They don't understand it. They can't really integrate that as knowledge within the body until they touch the stove and get burned. And then from there, it's imprinted biologically, and they are able to understand, okay, when I do that, this is the consequence of that. And it's very much the same thing. So long before we are ever intending to interact with these things, we are interacting with these things. We are always interacting with the spiritual realm. We are always interacting with things like angels, demons, spirit guides, ancestors. And I don't really like the word demon, because I feel like it is kind of like this blanket term that is used for literally everything. I mean, I come from religious extremism, and I come from radical Christianity, where the term demon, it's placed on absolutely everything. And if something isn't in alignment with what they think the Bible is saying, what their interpretation of the Bible is, then it's demonic. And it's really ironic when you can actually clairvoyantly see these things, and you're able to see what is demonic and what isn't demonic. And I know firsthand, I experienced so much demonic activity in the church, more so than what I experienced kind of in like the day-to-day, because there are these egregores that are built up based on all of this emotional energy in those kinds of environments that, yeah, people don't know what they're connecting to. So I tend to prefer the term lower astral entities. I feel like it's an easier blanket term, and then from there we can kind of break up what different things are. But so when you're distinguishing between spirit guides, ancestors, angels, demons, to use your wording, and deceased people, it is like learning a language, or basically anything else. It's kind of like if you were to say, well, how do you distinguish between vegetables or fruits or meats? How do you know which is which? If you are someone that has never eaten food before, that how do you distinguish that? You distinguish it by immersing yourself in it. You distinguish it by getting to know it, by becoming familiar with it. Just like if you were learning a new language, you learn to read this language by immersing yourself into it, by reading, by listening to things, by practice. So we are already interacting with these things 24/7, but what we can do is we can enter into those interactions in a way that is very mindful, in a way where we are going into it intentionally, and we are going into it consciously, and learning how to feel out the energy. There is a different energy signature for everything, and depending on what kind of psychic you are, you might interpret these things completely differently. So if you're very clairsentient, you might be reading energy based on sensations in your body and things that you're picking up in your body. And I'll try and give some examples for everything, if that helps. So I'm very clairsentient. And if I'm around, okay, let's say that I'm around something that is a more demonic energy or a lower astral energy, it's common that I would feel nauseous. I might feel dizzy. I might feel waves of anxiety. My body temperature might start to like rise or drop in a way that's uncomfortable, because your body temperature can also change for things that are of a higher nature, but it's not going to be uncomfortable. You aren't going to have this feeling like you are in a furnace and the heat is being turned up or something, you know what I mean? So you might experience physical sensations like that. If you are around a spirit guide, you may experience feelings of maybe like a presence kind of hovering over you that feels very comforting. Your ears may start ringing, and this can actually be true also for an angel, and everybody has their own angel. So that can be interchangeable. But your ears might start ringing in like a very high pitched frequency. It's not anything that's uncomfortable. It's not scary. You would feel a sense of peace. You would feel a sense of calm. So back to, like clairsentience and feeling things in your body. If you are around a higher energy, your nervous system is going to completely relax. You are going to feel your body just kind of like opening and unraveling in a way where you might feel like you're melting. You might feel like you become very physically soft. You might feel this warmth around you. You might feel a warmth inside of you that's kind of like this upward rising motion. If you are very clairvoyant, you might see you could see, shadow people. If you're interacting with something that is negative, you might see something that looks really grotesque or scary. You might see very dark, muddy, murky colors around people, or in certain areas of your home. You might see someone's like auric field may have strange things, such as like you might see snakes, you might see like dragons or an octopus type being, you may see worms. There are so many different things. Someone's field, it could look spiky, it could look murky, or it could look aggressive. I don't really know how else to explain that. There are so many different things. So what you have to do is you have to know what your main clairs are. You have to get to know yourself, get to know how you interact with the spirit world, how you experience these things. And when you do that, it becomes a lot easier to learn the language. If you're experiencing a lot of clairalience or psychic smell, and you are around something negative, it might have a strong, pungent odor, and it could smell kind of like death. Or like you are in a nursing home, you might smell something burning. If you are experiencing something higher, you could smell like roses or perfume, frankincense, myrrh, anything like that. You might smell honey. So yeah, I could go on and on and on. But at the end of the day, the way that you are going to be able to discern between these different things, the way that you are going to be able to understand it is to get to know it. And in order to get to know it, you have to get to know yourself, because if you don't know yourself, then everything else that you experience is going to be experienced through the filter of your trauma, the filter of your wounds. Our perception is directly influenced by our trauma, our wounds, our shadow. So if we aren't dealing with that, then everything else that we see is going to be a projection of that. We are not going to experience a clear reflection. It's going to be an inversion. So yeah, that's something we need to be really, really careful about. How can you tell what kinds of entities you're dealing with? Or how can you distinguish between spirit guide, ancestor, angel, demon, deceased person, etc.? I want to make sure that because I think this is such an important question. So I want to make sure that I say anything about it that is necessary to say, because I feel like anyone who's going to be working or doing anything in this realm, you need to know and understand this. So the final thing that I'm going to say is that you need to look at the fruit. And by fruit, I mean what attributes, what character traits, what life experiences, what emotions, what is coming out of those experiences? Are you growing as a person from those experiences? Or are they triggering trauma and pain? Are you having intrusive thoughts? So you need to look at, are you bearing positive fruit consistently? Is this something that, and by positive fruit, I'm not talking about like, oh, I just feel so euphoric in the moment. That doesn't mean anything. If you feel euphoric at all, you need to look at what is causing that, because euphoria is kind of like an unhinged emotion. There is no boundaries with it. And we can feel very, very positive emotions when we are interacting with things that are higher, but they're grounded. We will be centered. We'll be grounded. We won't be manic. We're not going to be like all up here. When we are experiencing that, or we are experiencing this euphoria that makes us feel like we're very like out of body, that is a red flag. And we really want to look at that. So yeah, the last thing I would say about that is to look at the fruit. Okay. Moving on to the next question, but I kept losing my voice in my last video, so I'm going to have more water this time. Okay. I went through a process in the past called deliverance, which was performed on myself and my significant other by several members of a Protestant church. Would not do again. They were naming different spirits and staring into my eyes, calling for things to come out. I thought it was comical and couldn't help laughing, so they said I had a demon of sarcasm. Nothing phenomenal happened to me. My significant other, however, experienced a profusely running nose with lots of fluid coming out of it, spasms in an arm and leg, and it culminated, wow, I cannot read right now, in her screaming a loud, mournful wail that sounded extremely sad. What happened from a spiritual perspective? Is the way churches perform these safe? How should entities and attachments actually be dealt with? How can you tell the difference between your own tendencies or the state of your nervous system and actual outside influences? Thanks, Layton. Okay, this is a really, really good question. I'm excited about this one. There are technically several questions, so I'm gonna do my best. So let's start with the idea of deliverance. So deliverance in the Christian church is essentially when you are, say you are dealing with a disease or emotional ailments, or entity attachment or whatever it may be. And they will, deliverance, it's kind of like a lesser exorcism, if you want to look at it that way. So the entire purpose and intention is to say different prayers over you, speak the names of demons, and they usually don't name demons in the sense of saying like the actual demonology name. I'm not sure if that happened in this instance, but usually they will say things like demon of sarcasm, or they might say you have a spirit of lust or a spirit of gluttony or a spirit of greed, whatever it is. Usually that's what they do. So the entire idea is that they call out these spirits, they name these things, and they zoot them. They get them out of you by prayer. Usually they lay hands on you. And I'm just going to say, as someone who experienced this firsthand for the majority of my life, 99% of the time, there is actually no deliverance happening. I'm not saying that it never happens. It definitely happens sometimes. But the majority of the time, what's happening is that people are interacting with these egregores, these energies that have been built up for so long. They have been built up in the building. They have been built up by specific people. They have been built up with specific prayers. And when they are speaking this stuff over you, there is, you know, stuff happening spiritually. And honestly, it's so, like, with the question of what happened from a spiritual science perspective, it's hard to say exactly what happened in this instance because I wasn't there to like clairvoyantly perceive it, but I can cover a few examples of things that I've seen. So a lot of people know, but maybe not everyone does, that I was raised in a cult, and it's a cult that is connected to or affiliated with lots of other cults of the exact same nature, one of which being the International House of Prayer. So when I was at the International House of Prayer, I had some really crazy experiences, personally, like in my own nervous system, and also experiences that I witnessed. And this was absolutely not even remotely the first time that I had witnessed these things or experienced these things, but I experienced enough well there that I mean, just when I think of that one instance of being there for the length of time that I was there, I can just think of so many experiences, like all off the top of my head, kind of like grouped into one setting. So I remember there was this one woman, and I was watching. So they have like a 24-hour prayer room that you go in, and there's like praise and worship, and it's mainly deliverance, and them just they like rotate people praying and all this stuff. So I'm in that room, and I see these two men lay hands on this woman, and she starts screaming bloody murder, and basically, I mean, it was actually really terrifying. Drops to the ground, and she's fully convulsing. Like at that point, it was a medical emergency. She was slamming her head into the ground. It was very scary. And what I saw in that instance was actually something being planted onto her. And this is unfortunately what we see in a lot of these kind of like Pentecostal or charismatic type churches. When you are looking at this deliverance stuff, a lot of the times what's actually happening is they are essentially summoning a specific kind of egregore or something, and then because they're laying hands on you, and because you are engaging in this ritual with them, you can take on this egregore, which causes physical manifestations. And the reason why it causes physical manifestations is because our nervous system, it's like a giant antenna, completely connected to the spiritual world and the higher realms and the lower realms, depending on what we are connecting with. And we have a lower nervous system, we have a material nervous system, and we have a higher nervous system. And the lower nervous system is directly connected to our trauma. It is connected to our pain, to our unhealed wounds. So when you have people who are laying hands on you physically, which, first of all, I do not recommend ever allowing someone to lay hands on you for spiritual purposes unless you really know and trust their energy. This is as someone who has been on the other end of that, as someone who does it myself, when I do healing on people, when I do exorcisms on people, when I pray over people, I am not ever going to lay hands on someone unless they give me their permission, unless they are completely consenting and they know exactly what it is that I'm doing. And I want them to trust me. And if they don't trust me, then they should do that with someone that they do trust. You should never put yourself in that position, because you simply do not know what someone is going to be doing to you. So you want to be really, really careful about that. But essentially what happens is, the second you allow that, you are, if you are actively consenting, then that's what's happening. You are consenting to whatever this ritual is, and you are automatically your spirit is automatically coming into agreement with whatever they are doing. So along with that, the reason why these physical manifestations happen is because, as I was saying, your nervous system is directly tied to the higher realms, directly tied to the lower realms. And when you drop into that lower nervous system, and that's essentially what's happening when someone does deliverance on you, when someone does an exorcism on you, or an energy healing, or any of these things, it is very, very common for you to immediately drop into the black sun. And the reason why is because you are dropping into your shadow. That's where you have to be in order for these things to be pulled up, in order to work with these things. And it doesn't mean that you are disconnected from Christ. If this is being done correctly, you will be in your heart and simultaneously, consciously, intentionally dropping into the black sun at the same time. You will be, it will be a conscious descent where you are going there with a specific purpose to achieve something. And so that's really important to note too. But the nervous system, everything, there's so much I could say about all of this. I'm like trying to condense it. So everything that we have never dealt with, all of the trauma, all of the pain, all of the wounding, it can even just be attachment trauma from being an infant, from being a child. It doesn't even have to be this traumatic event that we necessarily remember, but all of this stuff is going to be stored in our fascia. It's going to impact our nervous system, our immune system, our gut, our brain, literally everything. And the second we enter into consent with that kind of ritual, I'm just going to say, like, that's what it is. It's a ritual. Whenever we enter into consent with that kind of ritual, we are kind of consciously delving into all of this stuff and pulling up all of this stuff. And yeah, it's really common to experience somatic release on top of that. So sometimes the manifestations that we're seeing physically are literally the manifestations of an entity. Other times, the physical manifestations that we are seeing are manifestations of the nervous system, of somatic release. So that's really important to know. Yeah, spasms in an arm and leg. And a mournful wail that sounded extremely sad. To me, that sounds like somatic release. To me, that sounds like a very deep grief coming forward. And that can also just happen in I'm like falling off my desk over here. That can also just happen in the presence of Christ in general. It can happen around people that have very open hearts. And I don't know how many people were performing this. It says several members of a Protestant church. I mean, out of everyone there may have been someone there that was a very safe presence, that was connected to Christ, and that was facilitating this in a way where it was safe for different things to come up. The way that I would discern exactly what happened is I would look at the fruit of your significant other, or have them look at it to see kind of what their experience was after the fact. Because I will say that, the majority of these experiences of deliverance or exorcism in the church, people are not trained. They don't know what they're doing. They're just spouting off different things based on what they have been told to say or told to do, but they don't actually understand what they're doing. They don't actually understand spiritual science. They don't actually have any personal experience doing any of this stuff. And so because of that, nothing really happens. Nothing good will happen, I should say. It's kind of like, I'm trying to think of it's like if you're making soup or something, and say you have to add pepper and you accidentally dump a bunch in there. And what you would normally do, if you can visibly see what's happening, and can navigate the crock pot, or the pot, whatever it is that you're making this soup in, you would know that you could take a ladle or something and scoop out all the extra pepper and get it out of there before it spreads. But they can't see what they're doing. They don't know what's happening. They don't know how to navigate the spiritual realms. They don't have that sight. They don't have that awareness. And so when that happens, they just end up kind of stirring the pot and mixing everything in there. And when that happens, you might hit one spot that has like less pepper than another spot. And then you think like, oh, this is such a weird analogy, I'm sorry. But you think like, oh, this part isn't as peppery or something, so it must have worked. But in reality, it's everywhere. It is now spread absolutely everywhere. It's just because it's not all grouped in one spot anymore. You kind of don't notice it as much. Okay, how should entities and attachments actually be dealt with? How can you tell the difference between your own tendencies or the state of your nervous system and actual outside influences? The second part of this, I feel like I answered in part 1. So if you haven't seen that, I would go look at that. How should entities and attachments actually be dealt with? So this is a great question. I first of all, I want to say that everybody who is a practitioner who does exorcism, entity removal, anything like that, everyone is going to have their own way of doing it, their own method that is based on however they primarily experience entities or psychic awareness. So for me, I mainly experience, like my strongest clairs are clairsentience and clairvoyance. So I work with those the most, but that does not mean that that's the only way that you can do it. There are different methods that different people will use. I'm just going to explain mine because that's all I can do. I'm here to share things from my perspective, and if something is something that resonates with you and that you decide that you want to take it on and work with, then by all means do so. And if you decide to do things a different way, what matters is that we have the intention to connect with Christ. What matters is that we have so much love and compassion for the person that we're working with, even if that person is us. And what matters is that we are coming from a place that is very grounded, that is very humble. And when we do that, and we have an understanding of spiritual science, when we do that, we are bringing ourselves into a place that is going to be very pure. And in that space, it's kind of hard for things to go wrong. So the reason why I say that you have to have a lot of love and compassion in your heart when doing these things is because that is what frees other people. And I don't just mean love in general, I mean love for them. You need to love, like really, really strongly love. I don't mean these like fake feelings of love or this activation or this intensity necessarily. It needs to be a real, genuine love for whoever you are working with. You need to have a deep compassion for them. The second we start judging, the second we are projecting shame or our own opinions, we are already getting in the way. And this goes for us too. So if I'm working on myself, I need to love myself without guilt, without shame, without judgment. I need to love myself the way that Christ loves me. And I need to love other people the way that Christ loves them. In fact, when I'm doing this work on other people, that is like, it's honestly one of my favorite things to do because I just feel in such a state of love and compassion that that from that place, the more love you have for someone, the more compassion you have for someone, you are going to be operating from a place that's very selfless. You're going to be operating from a place where you would sacrifice yourself for them in a moment because the love you have for them is so deep and pure. So it's really, really important to be working from that state. We can't be working out of fear. We can't be working out of anger or judgment. That is not going to do anything. It's just going to make things worse. We're just going to be feeding whatever the attachment is. So that being said, I will just start to explain, I guess, a little bit of how I personally do things. And I do want to say that sometimes this stuff can get intense, but intense doesn't have to mean scary. And when you are surrounded by your guides, when you're doing this kind of thing, and you have love in your heart, and you have compassion in your heart, and you are viewing everything from a higher perspective, it is so sacred. And even if things feel difficult, even if they feel scary for a moment, you will become so empowered through that fear. It won't be the kind of fear that attracts lower astral entities, because it will be like just a natural human response that you then, through your higher perspective, are able to sanctify and transmute into pure courage. Does that make sense? So, already losing my voice. So, what I will generally do, and this applies whether or not you are working on yourself or another person. I do have a video where I talk about how I release entities and what I do with that you can go check out if you are interested. But essentially, I will start by laying hands on someone. If they don't want me to lay hands on them, which rarely happens, but sometimes if someone doesn't want you to, you can just kind of close your eyes and you can kind of scan their body clairvoyantly if you are able to do that. Or you can even hover your hands over them and just try and kind of, you want to find the hot spot. There's always going to be a hot spot if someone has entity attachments that they're dealing with. So say that they have something in their hip. I don't know. You will feel either a heat or a magnetism. You might feel a lot of pressure there. You might feel nausea when you hover over that area. You might feel disembodiment. You might see dark colors. You know, everything I was describing in the beginning of this video when I was talking about how to distinguish between different things. You want to look at whatever the hot spot is, locate it, and try and feel out what's happening. And if you're doing this on yourself, you want to really go inward and look for tension in your body. You want to close your eyes and do a body scan and find wherever you feel anxious. Find wherever you feel tense. Find wherever things feel really tight or wound up, and you can work from there. You can work from that space. So if I'm working on another person, the first thing that I will do is I will start pulling the energy through, usually through my hands, kind of like up into my heart. And I will focus on my love for that person. I'll focus on my compassion for that person. And I will focus on Christ. And I'll focus on the love of Christ and building that up and building that up and building that up. And once I have that so built up where I feel very grounded, I feel very centered within my heart, I consume it. I consume the pain. I consume the trauma, whatever it is. And this is not the same thing as like siphoning someone's energy or anything like that. You are not taking their life force. You are taking the parasitic entities that are feeding off of their life force. So this is not a vampiric thing. It's not, you are not affecting their life force. I want to be really clear about that. You are specifically taking on you are taking on this entity, or you are taking on this attachment that is usually coming from a place of deep trauma and usually coming from a place of deep pain. And you are bringing it into yourself and transmuting it with love. And actually, so one of my favorite books ever is Psychic Self-Defense by Dion Fortune. It's just absolutely incredible. It's so captivating. I can't even tell you how many times I have read that book, and I always get something new out of it, no matter how many times. And that book, I will never forget. There's one scene where she talks about, she's sharing a story of a man who is doing an exorcism on this boy. And he puts the boy in a protective circle, and the boy's in there. And this is a boy that was committing very, very dark acts. This was straight up possession, very, very demonic stuff. So he casts a circle and has the boy in the circle, and he consumes the entity through his compassion. He has so much compassion built up in his heart and built up in his spirit, and that he is able to consume it. And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I do. I was like, no way. I mean, I have never done that with someone that is like fully possessed, like what was happening here. But I was like, wow, that's exactly how I do things. And it was so interesting to see that, and very validating, because you see like horror movies, or then you see the way that the way that they're dealing with things in the church. And there's just so much fear, and it's all about being like angry and like yelling at things, and demanding that they leave and all of this stuff. And occasionally that can work, but the majority of the times it just doesn't. It does not work. We have to change the quality. We have to transmute it. That's what we're here for. So that's what I would say. Yeah, that's what I would say there. And like I said, I feel like I already answered the last part of that question. What are some great practices or items to shield you / make you look undesirable to such entities and lessen the chance of having to deal with them on any more significant level? So I had this question asked in various forms, and I decided to go with this one because I felt like it was worded really well. But yeah, I kind of condensed the other questions that I had that were basically asking this exact same thing for the sake of the length of the video. And yeah, so I covered this a little bit in the last video. But as for practices or items to shield you, so I have a cross pendant that I wear all the time. And I do want to say that there's nothing special about it. When we take material objects, we can assign meaning to them, and that assigned meaning can influence us based on our nervous system relationship to that assigned meaning. Does that make sense? But based on that, it can influence us. It can bring us into the heart more. It can kind of trigger our memory. But the objects on their own are not anything special. It's what we assign to them. It's how we work with them. So, sometimes you might see someone say like, oh, this object is, I'm going to say that every time I wear it, this is going to happen or something. Well, what makes that work? It's the intention behind it. It's what we assign to it. It's how we connect with it and how we choose to work with it. So you can absolutely do something like that. But I'm going to say that as for practices to make you look undesirable to such entities, be in the heart. Don't feed into lower emotions. And this is not bypassing. This is not the same thing as bypassing. This is not toxic positivity. It's more so about working with the shadow. It's more so about working with the lower emotions that we have and transmuting them. So we're not ignoring them. We're not bypassing them. We're transmuting them. We aren't letting them run rampant. We aren't letting them control us. We aren't dropping into our lower centers and staying there forever. Instead, we see them as a tool. We're working with it. We're learning from it. We're growing. We're integrating. So that's really important to know. And when we do that, we can bring ourselves up into the heart. We can purify our lower centers by bringing them into the heart. And there are a lot of different ways that we can do that. We can spend time with people that we really love. We can spend time in prayer. We can have an intentional practice of gratitude. We can serve other people, and when we are intentionally putting ourselves in that heart space, it changes the quality of our energy body. It changes the way that we look to other people, changes the way that we interact with the spiritual realm. It really impacts absolutely everything. So that's one thing that we could do when we purify the self, when we sanctify the self. We are essentially bringing ourselves into the higher nervous system. We're bearing positive fruit, and yeah, so that makes us look undesirable. I mean, they may want us in the sense that they're like, wow, they are so juicy with life force now, but so it's not necessarily that we are undesirable in the sense that they don't want us, but they can't really access us. They can't bring themselves into that frequency, for like lack of a better word. So when we become vulnerable to them, when we become susceptible, it's because we are lowering ourselves to resonate with them. They can't raise themselves to resonate with us when we are resonating from like a higher place. Yeah, also things, you want to limit addiction, and I mean, hopefully not have any addiction at all, but you really want to limit addiction. You want to look at how you spend your time. You want to look at where your priorities lie. You want to look at, are you acting from a place of love? Are you acting from a place of forgiveness? Or do you have unresolved trauma and anger and greed and selfishness and narcissism? I mean, we all have our things. So know what they are. Work on them. Invite Christ into them. Actively work on building your character. Actively work on having integrity. Actively work on purifying yourself, on bettering yourself. Yeah. So that's my answer for that. Have you delved into R. Thorson? I so recommend checking out his work. He talks on these topics from a clairvoyant and anthroposophical perspective. Yes, I have. I actually really enjoy a lot of his work, a lot of his perspectives. I will say that we do not see totally eye to eye on everything, and that's completely okay. I feel like, based on what I've read in a lot of his work, it is, he can be kind of black and white with some things, and I tend to be kind of the opposite of that, and be a lot more nuanced with different things, and that's completely okay. I really respect his perspective. I find that he has a lot of great things to say. Demons and Healing is a really good book, and he talks about 5G and artificial intelligence, and he also talks about things like translocation and kind of when we try and, going back to like the deliverance, it's like if you cast something out and you have not actually transmuted it, you have not actually dealt with it, it has not changed quality, it can go somewhere else. It can pop into, your spouse or your neighbor or your cat or whatever. So he talks about that too. And R. Thorson, his work, the way that he does exorcism, deliverance, healing, all of these things, is he takes what he finds, and locates whatever it is that the person is dealing with. He looks to see if it is an imbalance. Sorry. Once again, I was like, I'm going to drink so much water so that I don't lose my voice. I'm losing my voice. I'm going to do my best. He looks to see if the imbalance is more luciferic or if it's more ahrimanic, meaning more imbalanced to Lucifer or more imbalanced to Ahriman, opposed to being centered in Christ. And the way he describes it is that Christ is in the middle, and he will basically balance balance those forces in the middle and kind of overwhelm them with Christ to bring healing and to heal that imbalance. So I think his work is very valuable. I think he has a lot of great insights. I would definitely recommend checking it out and seeing kind of if it resonates with you. There are also things that he has said that I don't agree with, and I've just had a different experience with, and that's also okay. We're allowed to have different experiences than people, and but yeah, I would definitely recommend checking him out if you're interested in this kind of topic. He has a lot to say about it. Is it possible to simply command all entities around you that do not serve you to leave and succeed in cleansing your space? Or is it sometimes a bit more complicated than exerting your energy over them? We're getting to the bottom of the bottle over here. Yeah, so it's possible. That's not generally how it works. Yeah, I mean, it can work that way sometimes. It honestly depends. So, because this is referring to like entities around you, and that's very different than if something is straight up attaching to you. So, if something is not attached to you or your space, then yeah, you could do that and have things leave. It could also be a lot more complicated if things are attached to you, and in which case, you know, you can demand that it leaves with your voice and verbally, but if it has a place to thrive in your body, if it has an in based on an addiction that you have, or anger or judgment or hatred, or you know, anything like lust. I mean, there are so many different things that can create an in and kind of be an open door for these entities and these beings. And if we don't close that door, if we don't clean house, then we can tell it to leave. It's just gonna go to the grocery store and come right back. So yeah, it's more complicated. When we exert our energy over them, the way that we do that is by incorporating Christ. The way that we do that is by integrating Christ and by connecting with the Christ force and bringing ourselves into the heart. So if we're not in that place, then what are we exerting over them? Nothing. Our power comes from Christ. Our power comes from love. It comes from compassion. I hope that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to answer one more question, and that is, what exactly is exorcism? My goodness. So, exorcism, exorcism is essentially just casting out whatever is, or not even just casting out, removing, transmuting. There are so many different ways that we can do this. Consuming an entity or something that has attached to someone, or something that is possessing them. We are removing, we are pulling it out of them. We are either demanding that it leave, or we are consuming it with love and compassion, and changing the quality of it, which that happens the most with something that is like an emotional egregore or a thought form, but it can, you can still do that with lower astral entities that are just kind of like floating around the eighth sphere. You absolutely can do that. So yeah, in you know, like movies and TV shows, they see in an exorcism someone, they're like a priest usually will be throwing holy water on someone or calling out specific demon names, and you can, by all means, you can do things like that. It's not necessarily necessary. There are so many different methods of exorcism, and the thing that is the most important for exorcism, well, there's two things. The first thing is awareness. Like I was saying earlier with the soup, can you see what you're making? Can you see what you're doing? Can you see in front of you? And do you understand what's happening? You need to know that. You need to have an understanding of spiritual science. You need to have psychic sight or psychic feeling or some sort of development of these things in order to even know what you're working with. And then from there, you need to be connected to God. You need to be connected to Christ. You need to be connected to divinity, to the higher realms, to the angelic hierarchy. You need to be connected to those things. And you also need to have love. You need to have compassion, and there cannot be judgment in that space. And then from there, you can go into that space and create a very holy environment where you have the authority to exorcise demons because you've been given that authority. Everyone's been given that authority. But it's about whether or not you are stepping into it and you are doing things correctly and you have actually initiated yourself to that point, and immersed yourself in love and compassion enough to be able to do that. So I'm going to stop here, and then I will have one more video that I put out answering these questions. Hopefully that video goes a little bit better than this one, but if you bared with me throughout all of this, thank you so much, and I appreciate that. I have so much fun talking about this stuff. I love this topic so much. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to comment and ask them. I would love to continue talking about this kind of thing, and thank you for being here with me.